Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Take Care and Live podcast. So glad you decided to join us today. I'm excited about our conversation because today we're going to talk about this notion of momentum. As many of you may know, I've recently written a book called The Momentum List. Rediscover how to delight in time rather than be mastered by it. And this episode today is really a kickoff to understanding what momentum really is about. By the time you finish this episode, you will have a better understanding of what the word momentum should mean to you. I did a lot of research regarding momentum on my book and for my book. And so I recognize that we use that word often pretty loosely, but there's so much to that term that gets undervalued and underutilized. And we're going to unpack a bit of that today. You know, the word momentum sparks both exuberance and anxiety at the same time. It makes people really excited, and it also creates a lot of anxiety. And it creates an sense of excitement because when you have momentum, or when you've cultivated momentum, it's a sign that you have found your stride, that you're winning, you're making the long hoped for comeback right after experiencing a series of disappointing setbacks. On the other hand, the word momentum could also incite anxiety because for many people, the frustration of not being able to catch a break, of not being able to seem or see an opportunity to break through the barrier to make traction just feels like just too much. It's too disappointing, right? It's too disappointing of an idea. For others, the anxiety comes from this feeling that if they don't make the traction, that they're a failure. That if they start and then something gets in the way, that they're not worth the effort, or that it's not worth the effort to continue. And so the emotional strength, the physical strength, um, the time and the energy, having the cognitive space to even focus on something that they highly value, but seem to always be hitting a brick wall, is pretty overwhelming for them. I'm going to tell you this, that you're going to shoot for something. You're going to aim your energy and time and emotion somewhere. And I don't want to jump ahead, but the reality is you're going to make momentum in some direction. But I do understand that the mere thought of a goal or a target or fulfilling the fulfillment of a particular experience, to going after it, for a lot of people can feel overwhelming because they're already strapped for time. They're already overwhelmed with so many responsibilities. It could be in the care of their family, caring for a loved one, going back to school, taking on a lot of other responsibilities in other segments of their life. But what they tend to do is neglect themselves. And what we're going to discover today, and what we're going to talk about today and uncover today, is that momentum is not just about you, but it's about other people. Getting a hold and cultivating momentum in your life is not just about you, it's about other people. All right. So we're going to tackle that today. And so whether it's feelings of excitement or exhaustion that come to mind when you hear this word momentum, I want you to know, as I just said before, that you are going to make traction somewhere. You're going to move in one direction or another. You're going to move in a direction that has been established for you, or you're going to move in a direction that you have decided the target and where you're going to put your energies. You're going to move in one direction or another. It's going to either be in the direction that you establish because you said it's the course that you're going to take to get to your particular goal, to achieve that particular target, to have that specific experience, or you're going to be moved in the direction that you've allowed yourself to be led into or led towards because you've allowed other people's priorities to be your guide rather than establishing the priorities for yourself. So you will establish momentum. The question is, will you be moving in the direction that you want to see yourself flourish? Okay. All right. So, one of the most significant realignment experiences we've had in recent times regarding momentum hit us during the pandemic. People's priorities were significantly challenged. People revisited what they valued over the pandemic because that was a point in time when people didn't know what to expect. There was a sense that they didn't want to waste their time in something that they didn't significantly value or that they didn't believe would add value to their life for where it is and where it was they were at the time and where they wanted to be. There are critical points in time in life that force us into making a priority decision that's not based on everybody else, but priorities we've set for ourselves. We don't always want it to be a situation like a pandemic, but pandemics are, or the pandemic was certainly a case and point for how there was a realignment of people's priorities that caused them to move and make traction in other areas of their life that they valued most or more. In the education profession, over 300,000 educators and education related workers exited the profession. Right? There's now a significant retention problem in the field of education for educators, for teachers in particular. People are leaving and have left the profession in droves. That includes the 51,000 educators who exited the profession in the last 2 years. Right? We're almost 5 years out of the global pandemic. There's a reported 145,000 medical professionals who left the field shortly after the pandemic. And to this day, there continues to be a shortage of medical professionals, doctors, nurses who are available to do the work. People are working overtime and triple time, filling in gaps to meet needs of the public. So this thing is real. People experienced a reset in their priorities as a result of the pandemic. There were some things they were no longer going to tolerate or allow themselves to live through or focus on. It was a bit of a come to Jesus moment that they had with themselves about how they were using their time, and was it being used in the space and in ways that they felt they can make the most valuable contribution in this season in their life, and or where they wanted to give their energies, their time, will, and emotions. The hotel and hospitality industry, to this day, they're still almost 11% under their traction in employment. There is a consistent lag behind in service workers in that profession. Certainly, there were conditions during the pandemic that caused the restriction of access to certain places, which of course impacted the economy. But the lack of people returning to these industries after a mass exodus that could have been based just on one point in time shows us that that mass exodus was a reflection of a shift in people's priorities. So all of this is part of people's desire to shift direction. These statistics, these facts are part of giving us a sense of people's desire to shift direction in their lives in very dramatic ways, and then gain traction or momentum in a more preferred direction. Okay, so it's important to understand that, right? That mass exodus wasn't just because of markets. That mass exodus was not just because of markets. That mass exodus was because of mindsets. There was a need for significant personal and professional change. Okay. And so when people enter those spaces or those moments in their life when they see a need for profound personal or professional change, it is a ripe opportunity to cultivate momentum. So now let's talk about what momentum is. I promised you that you would have a clarified definition of momentum, one that is very different from what you've understood before, because its true significance really has been not as valued as it should be. But here is what the word momentum means. I'm going to go there in a moment. The word momentum overall, though, is rich, right? It's rich with intentions. The use of the word momentum can get people excited. It does and should be inspiring hope and optimism and a belief that things can change for the good. However, good intentions aren't enough. And so intentions must accompany decisive courses of action. When people made a mass exodus from their jobs during the pandemic because that was for them a turning point, that was a decisive course of action. And it was guided by a clear, hope-filled outcome that something else substantial could be done with their life in time. Doesn't mean that what they were doing before or that profession before wasn't important. It means that for them, the shift represented the reality for them that there can be and there was in their minds and what they had the faith for a significant opportunity to do something much more substantial in that phase and point of their life, right? Everybody has lives in different continuums, right? Different stages. So what is important to you in this season of your life may not be important to someone else. And so the areas in which you need to see yourself thrive and flourish will definitely be different from someone else. Even if you're the same age, have similar backgrounds, and similar aspirations. You're both distinct individuals. And so the traction you desire to make will be different from the traction someone else will desire to make. And it doesn't make either one of you or either one of your value systems less important than the other. All right. But back to momentum. The word momentum, as we currently understand it, does have some good bones, but it actually, the way it's used, it lacks the strength or the heft, I like to say, that the more significant meaning of the term is meant to convey. Momentum is intended not just to create movement. Momentum is not just about movement. Momentum is about compound value. Momentum is the ability of something to develop compound value, that every action that you take builds upon the next action that creates a stronger sustained force that makes you more and more effective, right? So that's what momentum should be doing, not just creating movement, but creating compound value. The oversimplified meaning of the word, however, as we see in a lot of dictionaries, says that it's the force that keeps an object moving. Well, that's really simple, but why does it keep an object moving? Momentum is the force that keeps an object moving because there's compound value, there's compounded energy heading in that direction. There's a persistent course of action that is that is relentless in keeping that object from being still. Right? So because of that, there is this continuous movement, is compounding, which causes a consistent flow, right? Which causes a consistent shift in movement. So with that oversimplified definition of momentum, I want to propose something to you a little bit different. To unpack what was more in alignment with the scientific understanding of momentum, but is also very practical for us each and every day. Here's how I define momentum. Momentum is the determination to identify your most important goals and consistently identify the time, the emotions, and the tangible resources, those are forces, necessary to propel your progress toward achieving them so that you can expand your capacity in helping others reach their own. I'm going to read that for you again. I want to say that for you again. Momentum is the determination to identify your most important goals and consistently dedicate the time, emotions, and tangible resources necessary to propel your progress towards achieving them so that you can expand your capacity in helping others and reach their own. When you define momentum that way, you see it as something that's not abstract and just simply optimistic, but it becomes something that is actionable, something that you are accountable for the results for, right? Because those results impact other people. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're driving down a highway and suddenly your car stalls. When your car stalls in the middle of the highway, the pace of the traffic also shifts. Initially, people may be able to turn a corner here, turn left, turn right there to avoid you. But that turn in itself shifts the pace and the movement, which impacts momentum. So when you lack momentum, when you begin to have stalled progress, that stalled progress has a ripple effect on everyone else. However, when you have established momentum and that same car is able to keep going and is able to function in the optimal level, it is contributing to the pace and the flow of traffic in a positive direction, right? It's creating the steady flow of movement. A lack of momentum can have a compound effect in the negative direction. The establishing and persistence of momentum can have a compounding effect in the positive direction. When that car, go back to the car is not stalled, it's able to keep moving, people are able to get to their destination on time, which means they're able to get to work with a lot less stress, which means when they walk into their office, or to pick up their children from school, there's a lot less feeling of anxiety. There's a limited level of frustration. There's a greater sense of peace, which allows them then to be able to move into the next stage of returning home. If they're picking up their children to go back home, or if they're on their way to work, engaging in the job with their mind focused on the work, not caught up in some of the adrenaline and cortisol stress raising feelings of their experience because of the challenge that they would have faced, and walked into their spaces with, had they been in a situation where they had to engage a stall car that caused them to fall behind schedule. Do you see the compound effect of momentum? Momentum has the capacity to have a compound effect in both the negative and the positive. So I'm going to read that for you again. Momentum is the determination to identify your most important goals and consistently dedicate the time, emotion, and tangible resources, what I call forces, to that you need, that are necessary for your progress so you can achieve them and then expand your capacity in helping others reach their own. Okay? These forces of time, emotions, and tangible resources is what you need to capitalize on if you're going to cultivate momentum. It is these forces that you're going to need to have unwavering determination to unify and have them work in collaboration with each other, despite all the distractions that may be attempting to pull you off course, or everyone else's priorities that might try to hijack your time, energy, and emotions and your resources in the direction that will not serve you in accomplishing what it is you want to accomplish. It is these forces that you are going to need to take a hold of: the force of time, the force of emotions, the force of tangible resources, so that you can then move with a sense of clarity, being reinvigorated or invigorated, so that you can move more purposefully and so that you can operate with greater productivity in the areas that matter to you most. Because when you do that, when you utilize those forces to serve your executing and achieving of the priorities that you hold in high esteem, once you're able to accomplish those priorities, you are then freed up cognitively to serve other people better, because you're no longer walking away with the weight or walking around with the weight of unfinished business. I talk more about this in my book, The Momentum List. So you have the job of harnessing those forces. The forces that you need to have in mind for momentum are time, emotions, intangible resources. Okay? Uh, the To begin the work of taking ownership of your time and priorities, those forces have to be at play in the direction that you are saying you're going to use them. That means other things will need to be put to the side. That means you're going to have to make concrete decisions, decisive decisions about how you're going to use your time, where you're going to put your emotional energy, and where you're going to invest tangible resources to accomplish what it is you want to accomplish. I'm going to give you a couple examples in just a moment. Okay? So, momentum is not just about a series of behaviors or actions. Momentum is a responsibility. Okay. Momentum is not just about, hey, making great gains, moving in one direction. Achieving momentum is a responsibility because it has the potential, whatever it is you're making traction on or traction in, has the potential and it will impact other people. Momentum has a job. The question is, are you going to give it a job that you have crafted the job description for in alignment with what you value? Or are you going to allow the job to be reflective of what the job description everyone else has written about your time, your emotions, and your tangible resources, and let that be how momentum is used? The decision is going to be yours, but those are going to be utilized in any event, and you're going to find yourself moving in one direction or another, and you are responsible for owning the trajectory of your momentum. So, how do you do that? Okay. When you harness the force of time, emotions, and tangible resources to cooperate with each other, you find in alignment with what it is you want to achieve, the compound interest will produce the outcome that you are hoping to achieve. It doesn't mean that it will be easy. It does not mean that it will not take sacrifice. It does not mean that you will not experience barriers or roadblocks that you have to think through and be strategic about how to operate. But if you're utilizing those forces in alignment with what it is you value, you will find that the compound interest will result in your ability to achieve that end product and then create an environment that can be useful and of benefit to other people. Here's one example. Recently, my wife and I decided to renovate our basement. And in renovating our basement, it required those three things: the force of time, emotions, and tangible resources. Time, because we needed to identify when it is we wanted to get the work done. We had a specific time period that we identified we wanted to achieve it. That force of time was critical. That meant we also need to make sure we can make the our space accessible to the people we were partnering with to get that work done. Emotions, we needed to also put structure and be prepared emotionally for that. Having people come in and out of your house to work on even a project that you want to get done has a level of taxation. It costs a little bit because you're rewiring your state of mind to accommodate the flow of other people in your space for a particular point in time. no matter how long or short it might be, for a greater purpose, yes, and for a goal that you've established, yes, but it's still a shift in your emotions. You've got to be increasingly more flexible. You have to anticipate that some things may take a little bit longer than others, which that's not just about time, that's about how you perceive the experience. Those are little things that actually can become frustration points if we don't recognize just how important the force of emotions is or are in making traction and in cultivating momentum. And then, of course, it's the tangible resources. We needed to not just have money, that's certainly it. But then we need to think about, like, what does the design look like? What do we want to what do we want the walls to look like? What do we want the floors to look like? What do we want how do we want the light to be reflected in that space, right? There were tangible resources that needed to be invested in that process. A simple example for you, but nevertheless it gives you the sense of momentum. Without us clearly delineating the time, the emotions, and tangible resources to the project, to the renovation, it would not have gotten done. We needed to bring them in harmony with each other. And we needed to um, embrace the reality that as we allowed those forces to collaborate with each other, and in some cases, create a little friction to what we were typically comfortable with, we had to anticipate um, that there would be a little bit of discomfort, a little bit of abnormality in experience from what we typically were used to, at least for that period and point in time, because that's what momentum does. The compound value of momentum is that it not only helps us to accomplish our goal, but to accomplish a goal, it takes us out of our comfort zone for particular points in time for the purpose of helping to escalate the traction, to enhance the traction um, in the direction that we want to achieve. And that force, that shift costs us something. It costs us something physically. It costs us something in terms of our time. It costs us something in terms of our resources. And that doesn't always feel comfortable, but it is nevertheless necessary. So I gave you that first example. Here's another example. Many years ago, I used to be a bigger guy. And so I used to be significantly overweight at one point, and I wanted to lose the weight. I used to talk about it all the time. And I got to a point in my life where I needed to see just a drastic shift. And there were some critical things I did over time that began to have compound value and created the momentum I needed to lose the weight. Certainly, my use of words were important, which I think contributed to the emotional aspect. But fundamentally, losing weight, you talk about time. You need to invest the time to go to the gym. I would invest the time to go work out, did a lot of walking, a lot of running. I invested time in reading about healthier lifestyles and what the choice of foods I could be eating and when should be eating them. I invested time in understanding, like, what was the function of my body, and what were the times that were optimal for me to work out and exercise, and what were the trigger points for me when I tended to overeat. Right, I need to spend time assessing myself and doing that. Right, still do that to this day. There was emotions, there was a cognitive investment I needed to make in the experience. Quite frankly, I made a cognitive investment long before the actual time investment, because I had rehearsed so much in my mind this vision and this hope and aspiration to be healthier and to lose the weight. I had invested a significant amount of emotions in that direction. Now, I had certainly invested emotions in the opposite direction, thinking bad about myself, judging myself, sometimes saying I would never accomplish it. I use that language as well. But when I experienced that shift in how I was utilizing my emotions and utilizing in the positive direction, it was that talk and constant affirming that I was going to lose the weight. I even remember during my college days when I would talk about it, when I finally lost a lot of the weight, I came back to college to visit campus one day, and folks were like, "You always said you were going to lose it. You did say you were going to lose it." And so, yes, I was able to capitalize on time and emotions and, of course, tangible resources, right? I had to invest in a new food program. What was I going to eat differently? I had to invest money in a different way because, unfortunately, eating healthier cost more in some instances than it would be, to eat in more unhealthy foods. Still remains common to this day. Nevertheless, I had to rally time, emotions, and tangible resources to achieving that goal, to get compounding interest in the positive direction of what it is I wanted to achieve. Were there setbacks? Absolutely. Was it challenging? Absolutely. Were there times when I didn't want to take action in that direction? I had some of those moments, but I had invested so much compound interest in how I was using my time, emotions, and tangible resources that even those moments didn't last long. Okay, so I gave you a picture of the job of what momentum is, and the forces involved. You need to understand that while the job of momentum is to provide you with a series of thoughts and actions that keep you moving in the desired direction, right? That's what was happening. I had very specific, tangible use of time, emotions, and tangible resources for both the examples I gave you. I'm sure you can think about that for yourself. But while the job momentum is provide you with a series of thoughts, actions that keep you moving in the desired direction, you are the one who is solely responsible to create the environment that sets those conditions for you to gain the traction. So you and I do not escape the responsibility of owning and facilitating that experience. We create the environment. We create the environment for momentum. This means that if there is a particular goal you want to accomplish, it could be as simple as having breakfast with your children more often during the course of the week, rather than getting caught in the trap of checking your email first thing in the morning, which sends you down a rabbit hole to just have barely enough time to get dressed, get kids in the car, and then drop them off to their respective locations. If your vision and your goal is to recapture what it looks like to sit down and have breakfast with your kids at least 3 to 4 days a week before they head off and start their day, that means you have the responsibility for resetting your time, your emotions, and your tangible resources. And that means that you may end up disappointing some people who are expecting or have grown to expect you to respond to things or take action on things at certain times, because you are realigning your value system to what it is that you want to see yourself flourish and where you want to see yourself flourish. Remember, I told you, you're going to gain traction. You're going to cultivate momentum in two ways, either in the direction that you have preferred, or based on the job description that you've given to momentum, or you are going to move and create momentum and cultivate momentum based on what other people have written for you. You are the one who owns the process, who creates the environment and the conditions to facilitate the momentum in the areas you want to gain traction. Okay? So what does all this mean? Again, I named it that gaining momentum is something you own. It's your responsibility. You have to consider very strongly where it is that you want to expand, what it is you want to master, what is it you want to refine, where is it that you want to invest, where there's a need to be a shift in your life to help you add the greatest value possible, or reassess your priorities or re-engage the priorities that matter to you most. Because when you begin to do that, you'll find that you're liberated to then serve other people well, because you have practiced serving yourself well. I talk about this in my book even more specifically, that momentum is not just a service to yourself, it is a service to others. And so if you are going to rediscover what it means to delight in time rather than be mastered by it, there will likely need to be a significant disruption to your status quo so that you can begin to experience and realize the kind of life that you're called to live, that is not driven by everybody else's needs, but is centered on not selfishness, but honoring the areas where you know you need to be making greater investments in yourself, in the things that you value, because you recognize those investments help to raise you up, or as people like to say, level you up in the areas where you feel fulfilled, where you can have a greater sense of hope, where you can have a greater sense of accomplishment. And that energy is utilized in the end, becomes an asset for when you go and serve others. All right. So here's the deal. I hope I gave you a clarified sense of momentum. I widened your view of what momentum is. I hope the examples I provided, I trust the examples I provided helped to give you a clearer picture, but we're going to dig in a little bit deeper in some upcoming episodes. I am going to, in the next series of episodes, we are going to unpack momentum some more, but I'm going to hone in specifically on what I describe as thieves of momentum. I call them momentum thieves, those things that get in the way of helping us to cultivate the momentum in the direction that we know, if we were to give it the time, the emotional attention, energy, and tangible resources that it needed and deserved, that it would flourish, that we would be better for it, and so would others. So I'm going to spin the next segment of episodes talking about the momentum thieves. They'll be brief and concise, but give you some insight on some of the things that are both cognitive, physical, or tangible and relational barriers, or thieves that try to show up and rob us of cultivating momentum in areas where we value most, or that we value most. So this is what I'm going to invite you to do before we head out. Huge appreciation for you spending time today with me on the Take Care and Live podcast. I'm going to invite you to subscribe and to stay tuned for more episodes. I'm going to also invite you to pick up my latest book, The Momentum List. Rediscover how to delight in time rather than be mastered by it. It is available wherever books are sold. And you can also, I'm going to invite you to visit my website, takecareandlive.com, where you can join my mailing list, gain access to resources and exclusive content, and stay informed on upcoming events that we will be doing via the work I do here on the Take Care and Live podcast. I will make sure all of the links are provided for you in the show notes. And I am grateful, as always, for spending this time with you. And I'm going to invite you to do one more thing, as I encourage everybody to do each and every time we get together. And that's to take care and live.